Certainly. Below is a chronologically and thematically organized essay based on the material you provided, written in a clear, scholarly, and coherent style. It traces the philosophical development of the concepts of necessity, freedom, and chance from ancient materialism to Marxist thought, culminating in the transformation of work into a prime necessity of life under communism. The evolution of the concept of necessity and freedom in philosophy. The history of philosophy may be understood as a continuous search for the laws that govern nature, society, and human thought, in other words, a quest to grasp the essence of necessity. From the atomists of ancient Greece to the dialectical materialists of the modern age, the problem of necessity, freedom, and chance has been a central thread in humanity's attempt to comprehend and transform the world. The birth of necessity in ancient materialism. The earliest systematic attempts to explain necessity in nature appeared in ancient materialist philosophy. Among the pre-Socratic thinkers, Heraclides Ponticus proposed that all things derived from fire according to necessity, which he called logos. The world, he held, moved in cyclical transformations. Everything returns to fire. This idea already contained the notion of a rational and necessary order in the universe. The Greek philosopher Democritus of Abdera, circa 460 to 370 BC, often regarded as the brightest representative of ancient materialism, laid the foundations of atomism. He argued that the universe consists of two eternal principles, atoms and the void. Atoms, differing only in shape, size, and position, are in constant motion, forming and dissolving all things. For Democritus, the emergence and destruction of worlds occur of necessity, not through divine will but as a natural process. He denied the existence of chance, viewing it as mere ignorance of causes. His philosophy provided the earliest understanding of causality and necessity as universal laws of motion. Building on Democritus, Epicurus, 341 to 270 BC, revived atomism but introduced a crucial modification, the concept of the spontaneous deviation of atoms, Kleinemann. By allowing atoms to deviate unpredictably in their motion, Epicurus introduced an element of chance within the framework of necessity. This marked a profound advance beyond Democritus' strict determinism, paving the way for a dialectical understanding of the interrelation between necessity and chance. In the Chinese philosophical tradition, Yang Chu, circa 395 to 335 BC, also expressed a form of materialist fatalism, holding that all events in nature and society followed the law of natural necessity, which he identified with fate. Similarly, the later Chinese materialist Tai Chen emphasized that all things were governed by natural necessity. These parallel developments show that across civilizations, the recognition of universal necessity was the first great step toward scientific thought, from rationalism to classical idealism. With the rise of modern science, the idea of necessity took a new form in the work of Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642, who declared that understanding the intrinsic necessity of phenomena represents the highest form of knowledge. In his view, the laws of nature could be mathematically expressed, and science's task was to uncover them. The rationalists of the 17th century deepened this idea. Leibniz, 1646 to 1716, formulated the law of causality and the principle of sufficient reason, stating that nothing arises without cause, everything arises by force of necessity. He opposed the empiricist claim that knowledge derives from sense experience, arguing that universality and necessity originate from the rational structure of thought. Rationalism, however, remained limited by its rigid separation of reason from experience. It absolutized logical necessity without seeing it as a product of historical and practical development. In contrast, Spinoza, 1632 to 1677, brought necessity and freedom into a single framework. He defined freedom as the recognition of necessity, asserting that true freedom is not the absence of causation, but acting in accordance with the known laws of nature. This idea became a cornerstone for later dialectical thought. 3. German idealism and the dialectic of freedom and necessity. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, German idealism undertook a profound re-examination of necessity and freedom. Fichte, following Spinoza, viewed freedom not as arbitrary will but as an act grounded in necessity, freedom becomes possible only through the understanding of necessity. Schelling, too, explored the unity of spirit and nature, subject and object, freedom and necessity. Yet, by basing this unity on divine will rather than material law, his philosophy slipped into fatalism. Hegel, however, achieved a qualitative breakthrough. His dialectics demonstrated that everything contains within itself the necessity of its own negation and transformation. This recognition of necessity as the inner law of development turned dialectics into what Herzen called the algebra of revolution. For Hegel, history itself was a rational process wherein freedom emerged through the realization of necessity from fatalism to dialectical materialism. In opposition to mechanistic materialism and fatalism, dialectical materialism redefined the relationship between necessity and chance, freedom and determinism. Fatalism, the belief that everything is preordained and that human action is powerless, was rejected as both unscientific and anti-dialectical. The metaphysical materialists, such as Hobbes and certain French thinkers of the 18th century, had denied objective chance and identified causality with necessity, leading to fatalistic conclusions. Marxism transformed this outlook by demonstrating that necessity manifests itself through chance, and that both are dialectically interrelated. Engels explained that where on the surface accident seems to rule, it is always governed by inner, hidden laws. Thus, the task of science is to discover the necessary laws behind apparent chance. Lenin further developed this principle, emphasizing the importance of studying contradictions as the driving force of development and of learning from the philosophical achievements of the past. In Marxist philosophy, necessity is understood as the law-governed character of natural and social processes, while freedom arises from the conscious recognition and practical application of these laws. Humanity becomes free not by escaping necessity, but by understanding and mastering it through knowledge and collective action. 5. Freedom, purpose, and responsibility in Marxist thought. Marxism regards the categories of freedom and necessity as expressions of the relationship between human activity and objective law. Idealist philosophies, such as existentialism, separate freedom from necessity, interpreting freedom as unconditioned will. Mechanistic determinism, on the other hand, denies freedom entirely, asserting that human actions are determined by external forces alone. Dialectical materialism unites these opposites. Necessity is primary, as it exists objectively in nature and society, while freedom grows as human beings comprehend and consciously apply necessity in transforming the world. Human purpose and will illustrate this relationship. Purpose represents the conscious goal of action, but it can become an effective force only when it aligns with objective laws and real possibilities. The dialectic of freedom and necessity also underlies moral responsibility. Responsibility presupposes the ability to act knowingly, to recognize necessity, and to make conscious choices in accordance with social and moral laws. Even the tragic in art and life reflects this contradiction. It arises when historically necessary aspirations cannot yet be realized under existing conditions, when freedom and necessity collide in an unresolvable tension. 6. The leap from the realm of necessity to the realm of freedom. In the Marxist conception of history, human progress is a movement from the realm of necessity to the realm of freedom. Under conditions of class society, human labor and social relations appear as external and alien forces that dominate individuals. The socialist revolution abolishes these antagonisms, enabling humanity to organize production consciously and collectively. During socialism, the first stage of communism, material interest and remuneration for work remain necessary incentives. However, in the higher phase of communism, labor itself will become a prime necessity of life. Work will no longer be performed for material reward but as a free and natural expression of human essence. In this stage, the moral and social motives of work will coincide with society's collective interest. Humanity, having mastered the laws of nature and society, will act freely in harmony with necessity. 7. Philosophy and the necessity of understanding. Philosophy, as a science, arose from humanity's need to comprehend the necessity underlying existence, to develop a rational world view and a method of logical thought. A scientific analysis of the history of philosophy reveals that every philosophical system is conditioned by the socio-economic development of its time, and expresses the ideological necessities of the class that produced it. The progress of philosophical thought, therefore, mirrors the growth of humanity's capacity to understand and direct necessity consciously. Conclusion. From Democritus' eternal atoms moving by necessity to Marx's vision of a society where necessity is consciously mastered, the history of philosophy reflects humanity's evolving relationship with nature and freedom. The ancient atomists discovered necessity in the natural order. The modern philosophers sought it in reason and law. Hegel revealed its dialectical motion, and Marxism transformed it into a practical instrument of liberation. In the final analysis, freedom is not the negation of necessity but its conscious realization. When humanity organizes its social life in accordance with understood and controlled necessity, when work itself becomes life's prime necessity, the historical journey from bondage to freedom will have reached its highest stage.